The best revenge you can do is disappear. Boom! No you in their life anymore.
What's happening, everyone? Today we're diving into something that's been trending across social media, and honestly, it's both heartbreaking and eye-opening. We're talking about the real aftermath of divorce that nobody wants to discuss openly. The raw, unfiltered emotions of women who made life-altering decisions and are now facing consequences they never saw coming. Now, before we get started, let me be clear about something. This isn't about celebrating anyone's pain or misery. These are real people going through real struggles, and there are children involved. But there's something important we need to examine here about decision-making, accountability, and the gap between expectations and reality. The first thing that strikes you when watching these videos is the complete shock these women express about basic life realities. Take this one woman who was a stay-at-home mom for 4 years. After her separation, she had $300 in her bank account and suddenly realized how expensive life actually is. She's working 2 jobs now just to afford childcare for her first job. Think about that for a second. She lived as an adult, had children, made major life decisions, and somehow never understood that housing, food, utilities, and childcare cost money. This raises a fundamental question about preparation and awareness. How do you navigate marriage, motherhood, and major life decisions without understanding basic economics? It suggests a level of dependency that was so complete, so total, that the most elementary aspects of independent living were completely foreign concepts. But here's where it gets really complex. We see women who are simultaneously demanding their ex-partners take full financial responsibility while also claiming they're doing all the parenting work. One woman explicitly states that because she feeds the kids, puts them to bed, wakes them up, and gets them dressed, her ex-husband should handle 100% of the financial burden. She told him from the beginning she would never get a job and he would have to take care of her. And she seems genuinely confused that this arrangement doesn't continue post-divorce. This mentality reveals something deeper about expectations and entitlement. Marriage involves mutual obligations and benefits. When you dissolve the marriage, those mutual obligations logically end too. Yet these women seem to expect the benefits to continue without the corresponding responsibilities. They want financial support without partnership, assistance without reciprocity. The emotional manipulation we see is particularly troubling. One woman films herself having a breakdown on her wedding anniversary, talking about how her ex-husband is waking up in someone else's bed while she's alone. She frames this as him being callous. But think about the timeline here. She initiated the divorce, broke apart the family, and now she's upset that he's moving forward with his life. The audacity to expect him to remain emotionally frozen while she processes her regret is staggering. Then there's the complete lack of accountability. Every single story follows the same pattern. The problems are always someone else's fault. The ex-husband isn't communicating. The ex-husband is lying to doctors. The ex-husband won't solve problems. But notice what's missing? Not one of these women explains what terrible things these men actually did to justify ending the marriage. If your ex-partner was truly awful, wouldn't you be able to articulate specific grievances? Instead, we get vague complaints about lack of communication and problem solving. The financial manipulation is especially revealing.
If no one sees you as an enemy, it means you're not important enough. If no one sees you as a threat, it means you're not strong enough.
We see a woman whose ex-husband quit his 6-figure electrician job to work minimum wage specifically to reduce his child support obligations. Her response? Pure outrage about how this affects her mortgage payments. Not concern for the children's well-being, not worry about the father's mental state or financial stress, but anger about her own financial situation. She can't fathom that a man might be willing to sacrifice his entire career rather than continue funding her lifestyle. This brings us to something really important about child support systems. These arrangements often create perverse incentives where the non-custodial parent becomes essentially a funding mechanism rather than a co-parent. When someone is willing to destroy their career to avoid these payments, it suggests the system has pushed them to a breaking point where extreme measures feel like the only option. The entitlement around holidays and special occasions is particularly jarring. Multiple women expressed genuine anger that their ex-partners don't send them Mother's Day gifts or acknowledgments. Think about the psychology here. You ended the relationship, removed yourself from this person's life, often in traumatic ways, and then you expect them to celebrate you? One woman demands that her ex-boyfriend buy McDonald's not just for his biological child, but for her other 3 children from different relationships. When he refuses, she publicly shames him online. This pattern suggests a fundamental misunderstanding of how relationships work. These women seem to believe that men exist primarily to provide resources and validation, and that these obligations continue regardless of how the women treat them. It's a transactional view of relationships that completely ignores the emotional and psychological needs of their partners. The impact on children throughout these stories is devastating. Kids are being used as emotional support systems for their mother's breakdowns. They're watching their parents engage in bitter conflicts over money and custody. They're being filmed during vulnerable moments for social media content. One heartbreaking scene shows a child asking to lay down with mommy while she's recording her emotional breakdown. The child becomes a prop in her performance of victimhood. What's particularly troubling is how these women frame custody arrangements. Having your child visit their father every other weekend is described as traumatic loss. 4 days a month with his own daughter, and somehow the mother is the victim because she doesn't have the child literally all the time. This reveals how custody discussions often prioritize the parent's emotional needs over the children's right to have relationships with both parents. The most revealing moments come when these women try to articulate what they actually miss. It's never specific qualities about their partners as people. Instead, they miss the security, the support, the attention, the provider role. One woman explicitly states she misses the benefits of marriage while simultaneously saying she doesn't miss any of it. She misses good morning texts, having someone to tell about her day, having someone to call when she's hurt. These are the benefits of partnership, but she threw away the actual partnership to chase some fantasy of independence.
Sometimes you gotta let a man who was never on your level to begin with go back to what he's used to. Because losing a man who couldn't properly love you isn't a loss.
The harsh reality check comes when they realize that independence means being truly independent. No backup plan, no safety net, no one else responsible for solving your problems. The woman crying on her bathroom floor because she has to make all parenting decisions alone perfectly illustrates this. She expected to keep all the benefits of having a partner while removing the actual partner from the equation. What we're witnessing is the collision between fantasy and reality. The fantasy was that leaving would bring freedom, excitement, and happiness without consequences. The reality is that actions have outcomes, decisions have costs, and you can't unbreak what you've broken just because you regret it. This isn't about being unsympathetic to genuine struggles. Single parenthood is genuinely difficult. Divorce can be traumatic for everyone involved. But there's a difference between acknowledging difficulty and refusing to accept responsibility for creating that difficulty. These women made choices that led directly to their current situations, yet they frame themselves as victims of circumstances beyond their control. The saddest part is that these situations were often entirely preventable. Marriage requires work, compromise, and sometimes staying when things get difficult. But our culture increasingly promotes the idea that any discomfort, any challenge, any period of unhappiness justifies ending the relationship. The grass always looks greener until you're responsible for watering it yourself. The children in these situations pay the ultimate price. They lose stable homes, consistent family structures, and often develop anxiety and behavioral issues from the chaos. Meanwhile, their mothers are so focused on their own emotional needs that they can't see the damage being done to the very people they claim to be protecting.
As an entrepreneur, I used to think once I would hit my business goals, women would just show up. And you know what? They didn't.
Here's what nobody talks about, though. Behind every one of these stories is a man who probably tried to make the marriage work, who may have begged his wife to reconsider, who lost his children, his home, and often a significant portion of his income. These men are expected to simply accept this outcome and continue providing support with no acknowledgement of their own losses or pain. The takeaway here isn't that divorce is never justified, or that unhappy people should stay in bad situations forever. But it is about understanding that major life decisions have major life consequences. It's about recognizing that relationships require both people to invest effort and make sacrifices. And it's about acknowledging that you can't expect to benefit from things you've chosen to destroy. If you're currently in a difficult relationship, before you make irreversible decisions, consider whether you've actually done the work to address the problems. Have you communicated clearly about your needs? Have you sought counseling? Have you given your partner a real opportunity to change?